Good evening and welcome to the City Council District 4 Candidate Forum. Some of you were with us last night. Raise your hand if you were with us last night. All right. See, I saw them and I thought of District 7 and 4. Can I start over, everybody? Okay. Welcome to the City Council District 7 Candidate Forum. And this forum is sponsored by the City of Austin's Ethics Review Commission and moderated by the Austin League of Women Voters. I'm Carol Eckelkamp with the Austin Area League. The League was formed out of the suffragette movement to give women the vote in 1920 and is now celebrating its 94th year. We are a nonpartisan political organization with both men and women members that promotes the informed and active participation of citizens in government. You can sign up with us anytime on our website. The League does not support or oppose candidates or parties. The League members who are helping tonight are Frances McIntyre, Lauren Krieger, Carol Olwin, Alicia Jones, and June Conway is managing our voter registrar table. This forum is being televised live on ATXN, is being recorded to be played back, I hope, many times, and will be on the League website, lwvaustin.org, at a later date. There will be volunteers who have 3x5 cards if any audience member would like to submit a question. The League will review the questions and, if time permits, ask as many as we can. Our candidates are seated in ballot order tonight. The format tonight will be as follows. Talk to the candidates a moment. The 2 minutes opening and closing statements. We'll have 2 minutes to answer each question. And our timekeeper will hold the cards denoting the time you have left. And I'll introduce our timekeepers now. We have Donna Pauler and Sandra Ragona. And there is a 1-minute warning halfway through. We have a 30-second warning and then a stop. And that is a hard stop, and it's red. Before we begin, let me state that the views expressed here are those of the candidates and not the sponsor, which is the Ethics Review Commission of the City of Austin, or the moderator, the Austin Area League of Women Voters. According to the guidelines of the League of Women Voters, there must be no applause or demonstrations of support or opposition from the audience at any time during our forum. Candidates, we ask that you refrain from any personal attacks on your opponents this evening. Welcome, candidates. We will now begin with a 2-minute opening statement. And as we are in ballot order, we will begin with you, Mrs. Poole.
Good evening, and I am really happy to be here, and I appreciate the League of Women Voters sponsoring this first forum for the District 7 campaign season. I am Leslie Poole. I'm the current council member for District 7. It's been an honor to represent you on the Austin City Council, and I'm proud of the work that I've done on the council for just about 2 years now. In that time, I have voted to establish the first ever City of Austin homestead exemption for all homeowners, and to raise the property value exemption to $80,000 for seniors and people with disabilities. I led the effort to increase budgets for our parks and pools and returned our libraries to pre-recession hours. I was the lead sponsor and passed Austin's climate plan, the community climate plan, and that sets us on a pathway to zero greenhouse emissions, net zero by 2050. I also was very involved in passing our solar purchase agreements and the Austin Energy reduction in rates with a new rate case. There's a lot of work that we've been doing up at the council. We face great challenges. Uncontrolled growth threatens our neighborhoods. It threatens our environment, too. Austin is becoming increasingly more unaffordable, and there is still so much work to be done. And I hope that you will re-elect me so that I can continue to fight for you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for attending, and thank you for the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight. My name's Natalie Gauldin. Again, I'm running to represent North Central Austin as the District 7 representative. I would love to give you a little bit of information about myself since I'm the challenger and haven't been in office yet. I actually grew up here in Austin. I lived in North Austin most of my entire life, I've never lived south of the river. I actually went to Gillette Elementary School. My childhood home was in Allendale, and then I went to Murkison Middle School and Anderson High School. I followed that up by going to UT Austin, which is a bit of a boring story, but it's great because I'm very committed to this city. After attending UT, I became a teacher where I worked with elementary age children. I've worked with over 20 different schools in the area and over a dozen different parks, working with Parks and Recreation Department. So I'm very familiar with this community, and I would be proud to serve as the council member. When I looked at running for this office, I think it was important to me that the person in this seat is engaged with the entire community. We are a very young district. Over 40% of the voting-aged residents are under the age of 35, and most of our residents are renters. So I think it's important for the representative to acknowledge that, and also acknowledge that your priorities are transportation and affordability, and that's what I will work for every day, and that's why my platform and focus is on those things.
We'll begin the questions with a question about the Grove planned unit development. We are in the middle of a controversial land use project affecting Districts 10 and 7, the Grove PUD. One of the many issues is the projected increase in traffic along 45th Street, Bull Creek Road, and Jackson Avenue. There are varying estimates on the number of cars the development will create when finished. How do you think council should proceed on this issue in light of the controversial traffic reports that have come to our attention? Ms. Poole?
The traffic that would come off of the PUD is currently rated at about 19,000 new cars. 7,000 cars currently drive down Bull Creek Road, and it's rated for 2,000. So we already have too many cars traveling on the road based on the traffic projections and standards for the city. So my goal was to reduce the amount of retail and commercial that would be built on the project. And the trade-off would be additional affordable housing, hopefully a larger park than what this developer has offered because it's currently very minimum number of acres. And if we were to reduce the number of units that draw the traffic, which tend to be commercial and retail, then we would have less traffic on the roads that we would have to mitigate for. It will be expensive to improve the roads along Bull Creek Road and 45th Street because they are not big enough roads to carry the amount of traffic that will come to that part of the city. So we really have to dig into that and carefully scrutinize the traffic impact analysis and make sure that if the developer is attracting vehicles to this site, I know that developer hopes that people will either walk or bike, but frankly, it is a destination project, which means people will be coming from around the city and around the region, and that is the intention of this development. So we really do have to be very aware of the amount of traffic that will be ticked up there. And I agree, it is a problem, and I'm working closely with the neighborhoods to protect them and to make sure that whatever is built there is compatible with the existing neighborhoods that surround it. We're looking at green field that is surrounded by neighborhoods, and we need to keep that in mind as far as compatibility. And so I'm working with the neighborhoods to make sure that happens.
Ms. Gauldin?
Well, first I'll say that I'm actually really excited about this project coming to this area of town. It's in an important area, which is the central part of our city, close to where people work already, where they would like to live, so they don't have to drive across town to get to work. I'm really excited also because it's not displacing any current residents from their homes. We don't have to tear anything down to allow new people to live in this part of Austin, and I'm really excited about that being able to happen. I'm also excited that we're going to see people given the opportunity to live, work, and play in the same area. And if my goal is to see many people as I possibly can, the people I talk to every day who said they would like to get out of their car more often, but they cannot. If it's my goal to make that happen, this is a place where we can see that happen. And so when I look at the concerns about traffic, I think it's really understandable. It's reasonable for people to question how much growth and how much additional cars will be on the street. So the only reasonable thing that I can do as a citizen is trust that city staff, the people with engineering expertise who've studied this in school, can make the right judgment calls and recommendations for City Council and us as citizens for what we should support. So that has always been my position, and I will continue to hold that position. And as far as I can understand, and everything that they've said, that this is a project that works. The numbers add up, and this site can hold the amount of cars that will come into the area.
The next question is about infrastructure, and we'll start with you, Ms. Gauldin. The increasing density in District 7 puts a greater pressure on our old sewer and water systems, as well as our storm drainage systems that mitigate flooding. How would you convince your council members and colleagues to spend the money it takes to maintain, repair, and replace these systems?
And thanks for that question. I think it's a really important one, especially for District 7, because as many of us are familiar with the Red Zone project over in the Brentwood Crestview area, we've seen additional, and we're talking over 100 houses being added to the floodplain. It's a great concern for me, and I'm sure it's a great concern for them and the neighbors around them that are wondering if they might be added to that floodplain in the future. So it's absolutely, I think, a necessity for the council to focus on making sure that we do improve the infrastructure as we grow. And I think it won't be necessarily difficult to make that happen, especially when we've seen the results of improper infrastructure down in the Onion Creek area. So I don't think it will be a difficult conversation to have, especially when we have public safety that's at risk. So, of course, I would make that a priority, especially knowing that it's so important to District 7.
Ms. Poole?
Last year, the council appointed 22 citizens, 2 from each of the districts, and, of course, the mayor, to the Flood Mitigation Task Force. We have had serial and serious flooding in the southern part of the city on Onion Creek and Williamson Creek, and our neighbors have been displaced out of their homes because the waters have rushed into their homes and essentially destroyed them. It's really expensive to buy out properties, but the previous council, to a certain extent, and this council, to a much larger extent, is committed to working with the neighborhoods so that we can find new homes for them and buy them out. Your home is your biggest asset. It's your biggest investment. And when you find the floodwaters coming through your front door, it's a very scary situation. The Flood Mitigation Task Force dug into these really difficult issues. It's really more than just finding the money. But I will say that finding the money is also difficult because the city has so many important issues that we have to address. But I'm committed to finding the monies. We did allocate a considerable sum already this year for buyouts. We do relocation, and we try to give people living expenses as well. So it's not simply the cost of your home, it's the cost of it's the cost of replacement and to get you on your feet again. And I think that's the right thing for us to do. We do have flooding concerns in District 7. Bila Rubin, who lives in off of Arroyo Seco, was the one who created the Red Zone project that my colleague here has mentioned. And last summer we had a forum so that the neighbors around Arroyo Seco and the Grover branch of Shoal Creek could come and talk with our watershed protection staff so that they could get good information on what they could do to protect themselves. And I am out of time. Thank you.
We'll move on to affordable housing. The city gives incentives to developers that reduce their costs if they build affordable units. Do you think this current system of incentives is working to produce more affordable housing in all areas of Austin? And explain.
So we have a framework that sets that up as a policy direction. Frequently what happens, though, is that developers will pay a fee in lieu and not actually provide on-the-ground affordable housing or sidewalks or some of the other community assets that the community wants. And this council has worked pretty hard to try to direct the decision-making toward actually providing real on-the-ground affordable units and to build the sidewalks that should come with new development, as another example. A fee in lieu for parks is also a way for a developer to pay less money than what the land might cost in order to provide parkland, especially in the more expensive parts of town like downtown, where land is scarcer and more expensive. So my position on fee waivers is that I am reluctant to grant them. I think that they are a backdoor out in many cases rather than an incentive. I would much rather see community benefits offered and true community benefits offered and make sure that when we're developing, we have the full community in mind and we can have concrete examples of where we're helping the people both who will live in that new community in affordable housing or the people who live in the neighborhood.
Ms. Gauldin?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The city gives incentives to developers that reduce their costs to build affordable housing units. Do you think this current system of incentives is working to produce more affordable housing in all areas of Austin?
Thank you. So I don't think the program's working as it was intended originally, and we can see, I'm a data-driven person, so looking at the data, we can see that it's actually not working. So no, I don't think that we're seeing the amount of affordable housing that we should see across the city, and we've recognized that NHCD has not performed up to the benchmarks that they've set for themselves. So I'm concerned about that, and on top of that, I'm concerned that there's a lot of loopholes in the current affordability rates that we have set. A lot of college students will actually slide in under the income caps because they're in college and they don't make a lot of money, but their parents make plenty of money. So those aren't really the people that we are building these units for, yet they're the ones who happen to benefit from it on a regular basis. So I'm concerned about the success of the program as it is today, but I do think that it's a good thing to incentivize affordable housing in this city because we really have a great need, and I want to see subsidized affordable housing as one of the solutions to our unaffordability issues in this city.
Next question is on transportation, and we'll start with you, Ms. Gauldin. The $720 million mobility bond package that includes funding for corridor mobility, which adds arterial roads and corridor improvements, local mobility funding for non-automobile road usage, such as pedestrians and cyclists, and regional mobility, which addresses congestion and enhances safety. Are you satisfied that this would solve much of our congestion and help move people through the city? Please explain.
So I think this is a really complicated question to answer, especially when we're talking about over $700 million of our taxpayer dollars. And I will be voting yes and supporting this bond. I don't think it's going to necessarily solve as much of our problems as we would like to see solved, but I do think that it is one step in the right direction. We have a great deal of need, especially, our sidewalk plan alone has a backlog of hundreds of millions of dollars, and so we need to start doing something. For several decades in this city, we have taken the approach of if you don't build it, they won't come. We've thought that if we try to prevent growth from coming to the city, if we don't build the infrastructure that we need, if we stop density, then people will stop coming to the city. And that has never been the case. Austin is a great place to live, and people will continue to move here. So unfortunately, we do have a backlog, and we have not built out the infrastructure that we need to support a city of this size, but we need to start doing something, and we need to start doing something big. So this is one step in a series of steps I'd like to see the city take to address our congestion issues.
Ms. Poole?
Thank you. When we first started talking about mobility earlier this year, we were allocating quarter-cent funds that we had gotten from the Project Connect, which was the rail bond that did not pass 2 years ago. And each district had about $2 million to invest in transportation infrastructure. I put my quarter-cent monies towards safe routes to school to build out the fragmented sidewalks around our schools and to provide protected bike lanes for students when they're riding their bikes with their parents to and from safely to get to and from school. So I took that support for safe routes to school with me when we entered the larger conversation of the $720 million bond package. My original position was for a lower amount that would focus primarily on active transportation, which was, again, primarily the sidewalks and safe routes to schools and protected bike lanes and urban trails for people who commute by bikes and for students going to and from school. But because this is a large city and all parts of the city vote on a bond, and because all parts of the city deserve to have some benefit from a bond, because it is an investment in the entire city, I was willing to support the larger package that includes additional funds for the corridors, which will also benefit District 7. Burnett Road is one of the major corridors that will have additional funds coming to a segment south of 183 and north of Allendale. North Lamar will also see some additional funds for corridor planning there as well. So the regional corridor and active transportation, local smaller projects all came together at that fairly high figure, and it is a big number. And I will be actively campaigning in support of the bonds this fall in hopes that they will pass. We deserve the investment. Thank you.
We'll move on to the tech industry. We understand from information in the American Statesman that the tech community is organizing political committees to, among other things, promote tech-friendly regulations or policies at the city council level. They will join other lobbyists, like developers, neighborhood groups, and environmental groups, who have access to our city council members. How can the city assure transparency of all lobbyists so that the public will know who influences your decisions?
Well, that goes directly to a piece of my good government legislation that I've been working on for about a year now, and that's lobby reform. And I am committed to open government and transparency and accountability. Earlier in my term, I passed the first ever electronic filing ordinance so that campaign finance reports are done electronically. And it's a first step in actually adopting a more robust system, but it moved us away from paper submissions, and it makes it possible for people to access and search the documents for common data elements. So I'm working on the lobby reform as well, so that if you lobby and you receive more than $2,000 in a quarter and work 26 hours or more on a lobbying effort, then you would cross one of the first thresholds to register as a lobbyist. It doesn't change anything about how you do your work, but it does require you to file and be accountable and transparent about the fact that you are seeking to influence legislation down at the city. I take that assignment really, really seriously, and have been working really hard. It's pretty complicated subject matter, but I think we're close to having a resolution of that.
Ms. Gauldin?
So when we start talking about technology, it reminds me that I didn't mention my current occupation, which is actually in the technology sector. I'm a technical writer, and I also do training. So I understand very much about the process to develop software and how the private sector is working these days. Unfortunately, you bring up this issue that we'll see a lot of lobbying being done by technology companies, and it's really unfortunate for me to see that it's already working on our District 7 representative, because currently we're seeing support for over $250,000, and much of which would go to marketing technology companies in Austin, and we can all see that they're doing just fine these days, and I question why that is a priority, especially knowing that many of the residents I've spoken to in our neighborhoods are concerned that they are being priced out of their homes, and they're seeing people pay millions of dollars to million-dollar homes in Allendale these days. So when we see that happening, we see a lot of money going into the area, and then we see our representation supporting these lobbyists who have asked for additional money for businesses that are already making quite a good deal of funds. It's something that concerns me. So
Next question is regarding the codes, and Ms. Gauldin, we'll start with you. Austin's rewriting its land development code. We hear terms like missing middle housing that provides a range of housing types with incremental increases in density ranging from accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, courtyard housing, bungalow courts, live-work units, studios, as well as those offering larger units. Do you think this type of housing, along with parking, density bonuses, and other development standards, should be imposed to encourage redevelopment and additional density in established neighborhoods? Please explain.
Okay. So that's going to be one of the biggest jobs that the next council member has to do. And next year we're going to have to vote on CodeNext. And CodeNext will change the way that our land development code is written. And I am really excited to have the opportunity to be in that position, especially having grown up in this area, seeing a lot of the people that I grew up with being pushed out because they can no longer afford to live in the very neighborhoods that they grew up in. That's a great concern for me. I'm also seeing them now live in the suburbs, and they have to drive in and add to the congestion issues that we're all concerned with these days. So when I see that opportunity to diversify in housing types in this city, I think it's a great thing. I think that that diversity in housing types is going to lead to diversity in residents and give people the opportunity to make small sacrifices if they want to live in an area that works better for them. And I'm hoping that they would choose to live in an area that's closer to their works. And so they'll have to drive a little bit less to get in, or maybe have the opportunity to ride on a bus or walk to work. And in order to get to that point, we have to change a little bit. But to me, the true character of our neighborhoods, the characters that live within it. So if I can see a couple extra people live down the street from me, I think that's a great thing because that's giving them opportunity. And I welcome new neighbors. So I'm excited to see that process go forward, and I'm excited to see diversity in the neighborhoods.
Ms. Poole?
So the question was about diversity of housing types and CodeNext.
Yes, it's rewriting the land development code and missing middle housing, and that provides a range of housing types with incremental increases in the density from accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes.
Thank you. The missing middle that people talk about goes to, for example, in an apartment. If a developer is building an apartment, it's cheaper to build studios and one-bedrooms. But what we really need, if they are doing infill in the closer to downtown neighborhoods, is 2- and 3-bedroom units so that families can live in them. And that's the part, along with homes that are larger and that have 2- and 3 bedrooms, that is missing in our city, and a lot of that is because it's more expensive to build them. So when we talk about incentives and development and affordable housing, one of the specific requirements that we have been asking for on council is to make sure that there is a mix, that if a developer is going to get an incentive to provide additional units, that they have to have a mix of sizes and bedrooms so that we can accommodate families. It's really important for us to ensure that families still live in the central urban core of the city because that's where our excellent public schools are. I'm a huge supporter of our public schools and have been for a very long, my life. My daughter went to AISD, and that's the health of the community. That's the heart of the community. Families living with a wide array of ages in a neighborhood. And to CodeNext, that will be the blueprint for development for a very long time into the future. So it's really important that we get it right. My appointee to the Citizens Advisory Group for the Land Development Code has been working really hard for the last 6 to 8 months since he's been on that board, and there are a lot of very, very complicated and difficult issues that they've been working through. I look forward to opening up the conversation to the broader community next year, and I want us to take the time that we need to get it right. And that means having a lot of discussion in stakeholder groups and in the broader array, like settings like this, and maybe the League can help us with that.
Okay. We'll move on to the Austin Police. What is your opinion about the Austin Police Department and the services it provides? Please express your opinion about body cameras, community policing, and the racial or social sensitivities we are experiencing in many areas of Austin.
Just yesterday, I was out at the Delco Center for the memorial service for one of our senior police officers, Amir Abdul Khalik, who was killed as he was, ironically and sadly, escorting a funeral procession, and you are all aware of that. And from all accounts, he was a remarkable man and had a heart of a lion. I was really moved by that ceremony yesterday and felt very privileged to be invited to sit with my brothers and sisters with the first responders in the police department. I sit on the Public Safety Committee of the council, and I have worked in law enforcement for the constable's office at Travis County before I became a council member. And so I'm really concerned about the welfare of our uniformed officers, and I'm also very concerned that when they operate in the community, that it is entirely respectful across the board. We do have work to do always in those areas, and I support the work of community policing. We are looking at adopting adopting community policing, which we've talked about for a long time in this community. We are going to bring on, we're in budget right now, we're talking about shifting the district representatives into non-sworn civilian office employees so that the sworn officers can get back onto the streets and get back to doing the actual enforcement and patrols that they frankly would prefer to be doing. So we're looking at making some shifts to the culture there, and it'll take some time to get it all in place, but I fully support it. On body cameras, we are currently being sued so that is all on hold.
Thanks. Ms. Gauldin?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What is your opinion about the Austin Police Department and the services it provides in the context of body cameras, community policing, and the racial or social sensitivities we're experiencing in the city?
Thank you. So those are really complicated issues, of course. When we're talking about race relations in the city, we absolutely have an issue and a problem, but we have a nationwide problem as well. So I think it's the responsibility of this city to work on best practices that are developed continuously across the country. I absolutely support the police department's work. I think it's one of the most important services that we provide as a city, and a necessary service. And so it's important that we recognize the work that they do, the very important work, and that we support them where we can. And it's always going to be a community effort and a conversation that happens on both sides. And when you mention body cameras and community policing, I think it's definitely important to move in the direction of both of those things, because that's the values that I think are expressed by many in the community. We want to see the police officers that we are employing working with the people that we live next door to. And we want to have a healthy relationship with those officers. And as far as body cameras go, that was a desire clearly expressed by people and members of the community. So I think it's great to move in that direction. Like Councilmember Poole mentioned, we are being sued on that issue, but hopefully that contract issue gets worked out quickly, and we can get those programs in place.
This is regarding Austin Independent School District, and we'll start with you, Ms. Gauldin. Last year, the city spent $684,000 to continue funding AISD's full-time parent support specialist, $520,000 to maintain the primetime after-school program at AISD schools, $350,000 for AISD's Cable Channel 22, and $57,000 dedicated to fund AISD Family Resource Centers as part of our social service contract with Health and Human Services. Will you continue the level of this support? Why or why not? And what do you see as the biggest challenge of working with the Austin Independent School District?
Thanks. So your question is whether or not I would continue to support these services. Absolutely, yes, I would. I think we hear, I'm going every day knocking on doors and talking to members of the community, and I hear all the time that people are concerned about schools. And it's unfortunate that I tell them, well, the city council member is not necessarily responsible for that portion of your life. But we do have opportunities like the ones that you mentioned where we can support the schools and support the children that go to those schools. So when I see the structure that we currently have in place where the state captures some of the tax money, and I say some, but really I should say a giant sum of our tax dollars come out of the city of Austin and are redistributed to other districts across the state. And unfortunately, that puts us in a difficult position, especially with the ISDs. So it's great when we have the opportunity to support those programs. We should do so. I can't finish answering this question without mentioning that it's a little bit of a concern of mine that we're investing so much in AISD schools and programs, because we do have other ISDs that are within the boundaries of the city of Austin. District 7 alone also has a large portion of Pflugerville ISD students. We also have Round Rock ISD students. So knowing that those members of the community pay taxes to our city, it's important that we distribute those funds equally to the children in those parts of the city as well.
Ms. Poole?
So would I continue support for parent support specialists and the other AISD programs? You betcha. Yeah, it's more expensive this year than it was last year, and that's because AISD is having to send so much more of its tax dollars back to the state through recapture. I think it's really important that we make changes to the school finance law, and with Gina Hinojosa moving into the District 49 slot with Elliot Neistat having retired, and with her solid background in school finance and her willingness to take on some pretty heavy-duty issues, I would be happy to join her in testifying up at the Capitol in support of changes to school finance. I did a little bit of work on that when I was up at the LBJ school looking at school finance, and I also did, I was a public school, was my area of policy when I worked for Ann Kitchen at the state legislature when she was in the House. And there are a couple of things that we could do to change the indexing on school finance that would help with the redistribution, but it's really hard to get that kind of legislation passed through the state legislature, and it baffles me why we can't make the right decisions on school finance. But yes, absolutely, I support the education component of our budget, and in fact, when Paul Cruz and Gina and I think Ann Teich came to talk to me about it a year ago, they did the pitch, and I didn't know Gina at the time, and they wanted the support for I think it was about $1.2 million last year, and I said, you betcha, I will do it. You don't even have to ask.
We'll have to move on. Thank you. We're going to move to questions from the audience. So the first one is, do you support removing any parking along Shoal Creek Blvd to allow bike lanes on that street? Ms. Bull.
Do I support removing parking along Shoal Creek to allow bike lanes? Well, we talked about that issue, and I had just moved onto Shoal Creek Blvd in 2002 when that was a big issue for the community. And there were stakeholder meetings held, and there was a lot of conversation about it, and the city installed what was a failed attempt at trying to slow the traffic down. Those of you who live along Shoal Creek or were here at the time remember the redbud trees that were right at the eye level, and so when you were riding your bike, you just got whipped by the trees. So the city put a lot of money into putting all of that on Shoal Creek, and then they had to put a lot of money in to take it back out. I thought it was really unfortunate. What we have on Shoal Creek is the solution that the community and the city agreed to at the time. Should that be revisited? Possibly. But it needs to be a decision of the community and the people who live on Shoal Creek and the people who drive it. And that is my foundational philosophy of my role on council anyway, is my job is to listen to what the voters want and the residents want in the district, and to the best of my abilities find ways to, with the majority decision, to vote in that way. And so if we engaged in another stakeholder process and the community came together and said we only want parking on one side of the street and we want two-way bike lanes on the other, then I would support that. And if they said no, they don't want any changes at all, then we would put that issue aside for another time, and when things changed, it could be rediscussed. But I'm very receptive and responsive to what the residents in my district tell me that they'd like to see.
Ms. Gauldin. Thank you. So this is funny, we're both sitting here. Both of us live on Shoal Creek Blvd. So I also live on Shoal Creek Blvd, grew up in this area and traveled up and down it on bike many times. I biked myself here to this meeting tonight. It's important to me to have that option available to myself and my family. As I was in my 20s, I had absolutely no problems riding my bike around the city. I wasn't really nervous about too much of the traffic. The combination of the cars and the bikes on the road, I was able to handle it. Once I had my daughter, that was when I really became concerned about the way that some of our streets are designed, because I'm doing a great thing for our city by removing a car from the lanes. We're all concerned about traffic congestion, so it's a great thing when people can choose to use other modes of transportation. But when I had my daughter, I realized how unsafe it really is and how uncomfortable I would get having, my 2-year-old sitting inches away from a fast-moving vehicle. So with that in mind, and knowing that I stopped riding my bike as much because of the situation that we're in, I think it's really important that we take steps towards making the community safer. And I want my daughter to be able to ride her bike to school instead of having to drive her. And in order to make that happen, we're going to have to make some changes. One of the positive things is that we really have some creative designers down at Transportation Department, and one thing that we can do is make customized designs on the roads to make sure that everybody has some access to parking. So we don't necessarily, especially with the right-of-way that we have on Shoal Creek, have to remove parking completely from every resident and give them the protection that comes with bike lanes.
Okay, our next question is regarding homelessness. Ms. Gauldin, we'll start with you. Homelessness has been identified as a top priority in Austin. What are your thoughts about homelessness and how to address it? So,
absolutely, homelessness is a big priority in the city. It's a concern, and it relates directly back to unaffordability. Of course, there's a mental health component on many levels as well, and there's other factors that add to our homeless population. But I think when we look at how we serve our community, that's one portion that we need to invest in. And when I look at the numbers, and again, I like looking at the data when supporting policy decisions at the city level, I see that for every dollar that we invest in ending the homeless problem in this city, we actually get money back because we're not spending that money in social services, months down the road. So I think it's a great thing for us to focus in on, and I applaud the mayor for his recent efforts for veteran homelessness. So I'd love to continue in that direction.
Ms. Poole?
So Mayor Pro Tem Tovo piloted, and I supported her in this initiative earlier this year, the HOST team, which is Homeless Outreach Street Team. And she was designated around the UT area. It has been tremendously successful, especially for younger folks who are homeless. So it's a combination of reaching out to them, finding what their the concerns are that they may have. Some of them are physical illnesses, some of them are mental illnesses, some of them are just people are running away and they're afraid. But we have a special outreach team that is designated in that area of town specifically to find the young people and older folks too who happen to be living in that area rough out on the street, and help them be better housed. The previous council began an outreach to house all of our homeless veterans, and just last month, HUD Secretary Castro came to Austin to recognize that Austin had finally, and by numbers, had been able to get in front of the growth of veterans' homelessness, so that we have housed all of the ones that we're looking for a place to live. There's so much more work to do. I am beginning an effort in the second phase of the HUD program. The first phase was to house veterans. The second is to house youth. And this will also dovetail with the host teams on the street looking for homeless youth, to find housing for them that is appropriate and helps them get back into the mainstream and help them with whatever adjacent and collateral issues that they may have. It's a deep problem in our community, and I'm committed to working on that.
Should a builder or developer be allowed utility infrastructure fee waivers on market rate construction? Ms. Poole.
Should a developer have fee waivers on market rate construction? Well, the idea of the market rate construction is that they build based on what they expect to receive back. And so I would say no. I suppose there may be some situations where if the city could ensure we would have additional affordable units in a development, we could add that in under smart housing or some program like that. But I think fee waivers should be very few and far between. Most developers have a sense of how much it costs to build and what their profit margin will be. And if they're basing that on getting additional support from the city, then there has to be a community benefit coming back to the city.
Ms. Gauldin?
When we ask whether or not they should receive fee waivers, I'm assuming that there would be some sort of benefit back to the city if we're offering to them the opportunity to not have to spend that extra money. I don't know if there's more specifics behind that question, but I'm assuming maybe if we wanted to encourage growth in a certain part of town, we might choose to do that. If we wanted to encourage infrastructure investments other than the ones that they would naturally make as part of the project, that could be a situation where I can imagine supporting. But in general, should we just throw out fee waivers? Probably not.
Ms. Gauldin, we'll start with you. How is the climate protection plan coming, and when will we shut down our share of Fayette Coal Plant?
So it's my understanding that the current council, and especially Councilmember Poole, have worked really hard on getting that coal plant closed down as quickly as we can. I think that's great. I really appreciate that our current council has invested so much in renewable energy. I think that's a priority and a value of this city, and it will continue to be for years to come. So I'm excited to see that progress, and I'm hoping to see that job finished.
Ms. Poole?
The community put a lot of work into assembling the elements of the Austin Community Climate Plan over a series of years, and a number of the folks who worked on it are in the room here tonight. And I was just fortunate to be the one to lead on the adoption of the climate plan a year ago. The council voted overwhelmingly to adopt it so that we could get to net zero greenhouse emissions by 2050. We're making some progress on moving that forward. Closing down Fayette is a big step in that direction. In the rate case, part of the settlement that Public Citizen and the Sierra Club brokered during negotiations was to ensure that Austin Energy would begin those negotiations to get out of a fairly complicated contract with the Lower Colorado River Authority. We also have to set aside money so that we can buy out the portions of the plant that the City of Austin owns. It's a partnership. So we have a few years in order to accumulate the down payment and sufficient funds in order to buy our way out of Fayette, but it sounds like we have agreement on the council, and I don't want to estimate or discount how important that decision was a couple of weeks ago. It was a huge win for Austin. That Austin Energy, we encouraged them to stay at the table with Public Citizen and the Sierra Club, and I was part of calling for them to stay at the table with our environmental advocates, and we had really good outcomes as a result of that.
So with that, we'll move on to our closing statements. Since we began with Ms. Poole, Ms. Gauldin, you can begin.
Well, again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, being engaged in this process. It's a fantastic thing to watch, and I appreciate being involved in this, especially sitting here in the very room that I would take gymnastics in as a child. So it's a really exciting moment for me. I never really saw myself as a career politician, and I don't believe that's what I am, but I try to tell people I'm not a politician, and they correct me, and I see where I'm sitting today. So what I would really like to do is represent you, listen to your voices, and do what matters most to you every single day. And I, again, think that that is focusing on the issues of transportation and affordability, and looking towards the future of Austin. Again, we're a young district. We have many people who are currently renting who would like to have the opportunity to own homes, and I think the future of this city is one with many options. We need housing type diversity so we can have a diversity of residents in this area, a middle class area, and I want to see us have a diversity of transportation options. Every day when I talk to people going door to door in these neighborhoods, I hear that they would like to get out of their cars. I would like to give you the opportunity to do that by investing in multimodal transportation options in the future. So with that being said, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight, and thank you for considering me, especially knowing that I have a young daughter who I'd like to see grow up in a city that works for her. Thank you.
Ms. Poole, your closing statement?
My thanks to the League for having this forum tonight, and for everybody in the district, or those of you who may not live in District 7, for coming out tonight to listen. This is the first one of the District 7 forums, so you all are in at the very front end. It has been a real honor and privilege to serve as the District 7 council member since January of 2015, when we were sworn in just about 20 months ago. It's been, I call it a vertical learning curve for those of us on council, because not only were many of us new to the role, although I had significant background serving on city boards and commissions and on bond committees, so I had a really good understanding coming in of how the city worked, you can't really know the complexity and the intricacies of the municipal organism that the city is until you're right there in the middle of it. Not only have we been learning about the programs and the processes and the protocols at the city, but we have been crafting new ones. With the 10-1 council, we have thrown the playbook out, and it's been a little bit uncomfortable sometimes and a little bit messy maybe, but we have been crafting new procedures, and we are all learning along the way. And I appreciate the fact that everybody has put so much trust and has patience in the council as we do forge a new form of governance, and that was because the citizens united and said we needed to have a different form of governance. And so we have the single-member districts, and we had to recraft how we operated at the city in order to accommodate a larger council. So I thank you all for giving me the opportunity, not just here tonight, but the past months, and I hope for a 4-year term beginning next year. It is my pleasure and honor to serve you on the City Council. Thank you so much.
Audience, please applaud for these candidates. I'm not a star. We want to thank the Ethics Review Commission, the Northwest Recreation Center, the city staff who set this room up. Excuse me. and the Austin League of Women Voter Volunteers. The League hopes that this forum has helped you become informed about the city folks who represent you on the City Council. This is a very important election, and your participation is vital to our democracy. The League continues to publish a voter's guide, which will be in the Austin American-Statesman on Sunday, October 23rd, just one day before early voting begins on October 24th. It will also be online at the lwvaustin.org website. Election day is November the 8th, and you may vote at any polling place that has a sign that says "Vote Here." If you do not have a photo ID, you may bring other identifying items like a utility bill in your name or your voter's registration card, among others. The League website has information regarding what is required. There are also some great pamphlets on the table in the back that provide details about early voting, such as the location of the voting mega centers. The Travis County, this is fresh off the press. It has some locations for those mega voting centers. Travis County expects big crowds at the polls and encourages you to vote early. Thank you again for your attendance. Thank you all for participating in this forum with us. Tell your friends and neighbors to join you at the polls and vote early. Thank you very much.